Thanks everybody, thanks for coming, thanks for the opportunity, thanks Michael, and thanks to the team, and thank you to Bank West. Today's theme, I was given the opportunity to talk about chance. So you've already seen the first video there that was of our shop front. Now I guess I'll explain the story by discussing who I am, but I guess what we do with the shop front is we offer our shop front a way to emerging local artists to present their work, and we give them a chance really to sort of showcase their work. And I know that's a pretty funny photo. I know my wife's laughing at that. But it gives them a chance to showcase their work where otherwise they wouldn't get into galleries, because galleries are very selective about putting people's work into spaces. So we weren't using the shop front, so we thought, why not give it away? So we go on for 3 weeks on 1 week changeover, and it's continued on. We've got lots of bookings. We've got all sorts of strange things in the window. Some things, I guess, some people would not call it art or scoff at it, but it's part of the reason why I do it is for that discussion and the discourse. The other reason behind that is it's a subtle marketing tool. People do take photographs of the work, our signs in the image, and these things pop up. I also use my space as a rehearsal studio and recording, so it's not just an architectural office, it's a shop front gallery, and it's a rehearsal studio for myself. So I guess, let's blow it out. Talking a little bit about who I am. I'm a husband, father, drummer and architect, I guess, if you start putting labels on people. But I'm an amateur at all of those things. And I won't go into the details about being an amateur husband. My wife tell you all the details there. Definitely an amateur father. I think anyone who is a father is actually making it up as they go. I know I am. These pictures will show you clearly how much of an amateur I am. Now, luckily our boy's not here today, so we can actually laugh at him, but he would find that hilarious as well. And he's that kind of character where he can, he's more than happy to dress up and be as feminine as possible, put makeup on, put dresses on, and then he can go outside in the backyard and act like a white supremacist and scold beer. Not that there's beer in that bottle, it was the empty bottle. One more example before I kick on. If you look a little bit closely at this image, that's actually an open blade on a Stanley knife. We didn't even see that until we saw the photo. So there's lots of fails, I guess, in my life, but it's been about a lot of chances as well. Being a drummer, if I was any good at drumming, I wouldn't be an architect. It's pretty simple. And definitely an amateur architect, because architects, when you come out of university after 5 years, you don't know a lot about building. Luckily I had a lot of carpentry experience and drafting experience before that, and the reason why I started out on my own was because I had a bit more experience than others that come out of university. But it's a really tough game to be in, and I think you're an amateur until you're probably 80, 90, like a lot of the masters that are still doing the work. But I guess the one thing, I actually looked up the word amateur because it made me feel a little bit better about being an amateur. So it's one who has a taste for something, and that for me sort of sums up my life. So I've always given things a chance. If I wanted to try something, I'll give it a shot. And I guess today is about that theme. So I'll talk about the beginning of the story and the birth of chance. But my story begins in Belfast, where my parents were born, and they took a chance to move away from the troubles in Belfast and move to Melbourne. At the time, in the 70s, Melbourne skyline looked like this. And just as a tangent, I'll flip to an image of Perth today. I see a lot of similarities between Melbourne and Perth of Melbourne at that time. You can see how Melbourne actually ignored the riverfront, ignored the south of the river at that time, and I'll talk about how that changed later on, but there's a lot of similarities to where Perth is today and how it turns back on the river and almost ignores the south of the river as well. That is changing, and Perth is in a really good place at the moment and has a great chance at making this city unbelievable. So we moved out to the airport in Melbourne. My dad worked at Qantas. He used to push food in and out of the planes. And I grew up in an area called Broadmeadows, and I don't know if there's any Melbourneites here. So Broadmeadows was a bit of a rough and tumble place, and it's, you know, for someone to go to the trouble to make a monopoly version of your suburb, goes to show what goes on there. And, you know, a lot of this did occur. You know, I did steal cars, I did not sleep with my sister, all sorts of things. What else is there? I don't beat my wife, I don't sell heroin, and we used to get into a lot of fights. But, you know, that was part of growing up in Broadmeadows. And the other characters that come out of that area, Carl Williams, obviously he's deceased, Crazy John, he's deceased, and Eddie McGuire. At the time when I came out of high school, this man became Premier of Victoria. This is 1992. Now Jeff Kennett, and I'm also a Hawke supporter, Jeff Kennett was a very brave man, so he decided to, at the time there was really restrictive planning policies in the city, very similar to how Perth is sitting at the moment as well. So this postcode 3000 planning document came out, which pretty much invited all the developers to come back into the city and build residential apartments and develop the city, intensify it, bring all the people back into the city, because the sprawl was just going on and on forever. So that had a knock-on effect, and obviously Jeff Kennett was big on public works. That's Jeff's shed, the convention centre, exhibition centre in Melbourne. That's the South Bank, the south of the river. Infrastructure, bridges to get across the river, sports stadiums, civic works and public spaces, which in turn, you know, invited some of the well-known sort of residential buildings that I saw in Melbourne growing up at that time. This is a building by Mondo Katsoulides, and this is early 90s this building came up, and I was really excited about this building. When these buildings turn up and the people turn into the city, then obviously, like what's happening in Perth at the moment, there's a bit of a momentum here, but it asks for other people to create bars and restaurants and all those other things that will feed those masses. So you saw all these venues pop up in the mid-90s. At the time, that was a number plate on Victoria, which was on the move, and that pretty much was my mentality at that time. So luckily my dad, working for Qantas, I used to get really, really cheap flights. So I took off around the world for 7 years and picked up whatever I could, shoveling snow off roofs, whitewater rafting guides, planting trees, whatever I could pick up. It was such a joy. And it reminds me of this book from Joseph Campbell, which is The Hero with 1,000 Faces, where he talks about the comfortable sphere that you live in, which is the known space. And there's a certain threshold, which is that line there. So when you take a chance and you cross that threshold, then there's all sorts of, yes, there's challenges and temptations, but there's lots of rewards and revelations after that, and you become a much better human being. So my advice is to sort of cross that threshold, take a chance. I came back to Australia, still had itchy feet, and travelled around in a camper van. And eventually arrived in Perth. Now this was 1999 when I turned up in my camper van. It had a really interesting tag with Perth, and I didn't understand it until one night I decided I'm actually going to go into the city. It was a Friday night, and see if I can go out and go to bars. I turned up in the city. This is 99, and it was dead. And I thought, this is not a city. Now, luckily, this was an important part in the city's growth. This is what I think anyway. This was Charles Landry, who turned up as a resident thinker in residence for the city of Perth, and I think Fawn brought them forward. And he presented a whole bunch of articles and presentations to the people of Perth, and the one I went to in 2006, I thought had a significant impact on the way Perth actually started to transform after that as well. So some more personal stories. I guess the other chance events is, this is our daughter Grace, who's here today. She was born 8 weeks early. At the time I was working away happily for another firm, and all of this just came up. So for me, I thought I've got to get priority straight into it, and I resigned, dropped what I was doing and started to work from home, and just picked up, bits of drafting work, small jobs, all that sort of stuff. And that's where the birth of what I do now, the Fine Spun, was born. I worked out of the back room. We had our second child, I got kicked out of there, and then I moved into the shed. And from there, I moved into the office. So there are some tips. I don't know if there's people in this room today that are sort of thinking about taking a leap, crossing the threshold. I would definitely advise you've got to do it. If you don't do it now, you'll be kicking yourself when you get older. There are some really simple tips, and they're all there. There's nothing original there, but it's all simple. So just make mistakes. You take the leap. You'll get rewarded for doing that. Start small. Do the jobs nobody wants. Be nice. That's simple. Work hard and fake it. No one knows that you've been out for 2 days or 3 years or 10 years or. I was out for a week, and someone was asking me if I'd done any residential mixed-use high-rise, and I said, yeah. Yeah, I can do that. Dream big and visualise, because even with the big jobs, when they do turn up, you can always break big jobs down into smaller packages. And it sounds weird, but it is just a lot of small jobs in one big package, is the way I see big jobs anyway. And one important one is don't start at the same time you have your first baby, and that's not showing up there, but that was hard work actually, having our first child premature and starting out on my own, so I wouldn't recommend that. So this is where I'm set up today in Maylands, in the shop front. That's the shop front where we run this fine window. Now, I'll step into the chance in architecture and the process of that. I guess, is there any architects here today? Gee, that's good. So to give you guys a bit of a sort of a story about what we do, creatively, every time we put pen to paper, there's an opportunity. There's a chance to actually add to the fabric of somebody's life, or to the fabric of the environment, or the fabric of the city. And this is how I see it when I start sketching. I'm a huge fan of drawing and sketching. I hate hitting the computer, and will do it at the very last minute. I find sketching at this moment in time allows you to be really, really loose, and it's a really important time to just turn off your brain and just start drawing. It doesn't matter if it's wrong, it doesn't matter if you make mistakes, just keep drawing. And you'll recognise that, I don't know, that was one of our first small bars that we did in 2006. That's Mrs. Brown, but that was just a quick sketch that I did in about 2 minutes, just sitting down at the client to say what I thought could work there. And you might recognise this sketch as well, but this is Mechanics Institute in its original kind of format. Now, we presented, this came to me just as I was just kept sketching, and I thought, the owners are telling me that they've got a 2-storey building that they're leasing out. They know they're going to put the flip side in the burger bar in the ground level, and they don't know what to do with the upper level. They'd like to join the two together, but there's not enough floor space. So I thought, well, I wonder if we can create that floor space. We can actually take over that air and build these platforms and these terraces above the existing roofs and structure, and actually create that space. So that's where that was born, really, where we decided to build a platform and terraces. And I presented this to the clients, because every time you show your clients this stuff, even if they're quick sketches, it's sometimes they're just like, are you crazy? But sometimes they're like, oh, that's it, you got it. And so they grabbed it straight away. And then the next step I thought was going to be hard was getting Heritage and the planning department, which is the MRA at the time, to actually okay that as well. We got through that process, and that's where Mechanics Institute was born as well. This is our latest project, Minion League in Beaufort Street. Just some quick sketch ideas for that. This is another project down in North Fremantle, which is it's a few weeks away from being open actually, but it's what we do. We try and look for spaces that haven't been used, and we take the chance to insert stuff into them that will actually add value to a client's project, especially the stuff that people don't see. I mean, that's fairly obvious in that scenario, because there's a whole bunch of open garden space here that was never used. It was just sitting around for drunk people, and nothing wrong with drunk people either. We do houses, but I'm trying to steer away from residential, because I find it's creatively it's a little bit stifling, because you've got I guess generally a man and a wife spending their life savings on one project, so it gets pretty intense and time consuming. So I'll go through the last section. I'll show some of our work and how Chance has had a part in some of those projects as well. Now, this project in Jollymont was a series of neglected apartments, and the chance that popped up here was the owner of the property. He asked a previous boss of mine whether he would like to do some work for him. That boss turned that job down, and he said, oh, Patrick might be able to do it. So he gave me a call, and we just started talking about this neglected block of units. And so this is how we found him, and he was getting rent for about $100 a week for 2-bedroom units. It was a fairly sizable project for me, because I was purely by myself at the time. But it's a series of 24 units in one block, and another 12 in another, 3 stories on this block, and 2 stories on the other one. And we decided to, add value to this property by obviously gutting and inserting kitchens and bathrooms that needed, because they hadn't been touched since the 60s. And landscape works and balconies off the main front facades to actually change the whole appearance of the building. So the landscape works were relatively simple. We did a lot of concrete and galvanised steel, maintenance free. This guy doesn't want to touch a paint brush ever again, so we don't paint things if we don't have to. And we cleaned up a lot of the exterior of the building and the concrete cancer, added a lot of the landscape works into that, and added these large sort of balconies onto the fronts of the units to give the owners some outdoor space as well. This led on to another chance project with the same client. He said, look, I've got a hotel in the city. Do you want to have a look at this? Because I can't rent out these back units, the back apartments. This is how we found the building. So we decided to do a similar thing, drop some outdoor spaces on the back of these units. And one of the things he was keen on, he's keen on sort of 60s modern architecture. And you can see in the snippet there, that's Harry Seidel's QB1 building there. And Harry's a big fan of modernism, I guess. So we decided to use some of Harry's typology, where he works a lot of curved balconies and forms into his buildings. And we did a similar thing to these balconies to create these outdoor spaces for all of these rear apartments. This is the Riverview Hotel on Mount Street in Perth. And so you can see it's a sort of a slight nod to that ever-present QB1 building there. The neighbour across the road from this client asked him if he knew any architects, and he said, oh, I've been working with Patrick, why don't you give him a call? So there's all these chance events where things pop up all the time, and if you be nice with people and work hard, they'll put you forward, they'll recommend you. I never advertise, and I don't want to grow any bigger, but I just want to maintain a constant work practice with good people, good clients, and people I enjoy working with. And I'm sure there might be people here today that are working in their own industry. That is very important to actually get right. There's nothing worse than bad clients. It makes your job terrible. So they said, oh, we're leasing out this space down in North Fremantle next to the Flipside store. We don't know what to do with it, but we're thinking about starting a bar. So this is how we found Mrs. Brown before we started, quite dilapidated. And so we approached this very simply. They had no money, so all we wanted to do was add some toilets at the bar and strip back on things that didn't need to be there. And it's pretty much the same approach I take on all projects. If I don't need to spend the money, then I try not to do it. I don't try to add things, to embellish things. And that goes with a lot of our projects. We added the exterior courtyard to that space as well. That in turn led on to the Mechanics Institute, same clients. And we found that building in a fairly dilapidated state as well. Although there were some heritage works that happened at the same time to protect that facade. So some of you will probably have been drunk in here before. This was a fairly simple project. It looks a little complex with the decks and the terraces, but from a heritage perspective as well, we hardly touched the other buildings. We pretty much, these floating terraces are pinned into the buildings either side, so we pretty much just pulled out a few brickworks, landed the steelwork into those pockets and bricked them back up. And that's the interior shot of that. And again, this has led on to the next project, which is Dominion Lee, which has just opened up last week. So this is on Beaufort Street, and I don't know if anyone's been there yet because it's pretty new. But we took over it was the old Court Wine Bar, and it was a bit of a failed attempt by the owners, Hamish and Siobhan, to actually run that premises as it was, as the Court Wine Bar. It failed, they couldn't get people in there, so I told them, look, you've got to take out the shop front and make it work. So we pretty much redid the shop front and worked on the interiors. So it's a ground level bar plus a basement bar with a kitchen back on the back of that as well. Same approach again, strip everything out. If it doesn't need to be there, pull it out. We also do houses. I'm not going to go into too much of these because we can talk about some of these afterwards. And some of our other projects, such as Solomon's Cafe. We do a lot of hospitality work. and Blake Street Cafe in North Perth. And lastly, this is the North Fremantle project, which is a fairly sizable site, but you can see how it's hard for you guys to see on this side. This is the original town hall, and I told them, let's not touch that, let's leave that building, it's going to be too hard, and let's work with the leftover space here. There was an old garage here, so we've reused that, we've dropped in a sea container into this space, and we're going to open up this whole landscape for public use and outdoor dining. The usual suspects, disabled toilets, kitchen, and then on the left-hand side, which a lot of people don't know about yet, there is another small bar going in as another venue. That is the same again. We didn't touch too much there. We just knocked off the back of that, dropped in the bar and the toilets. So they got two venues out of this building, when originally they were just looking to do something with the site because they own the site. This is where it sits at the moment. It's getting close to completion. There's obviously a bit of landscaping in there, but you can see that's the door into the bar. And eventually the 5-year plan for the whole building is to actually turn that building back into a big function gala space, which I think Perth could use something like that in the city, or even south of the city. So really, in summary, if you cross the threshold and you take a chance, you'll get rewarded tenfold. Thanks for your ears. Thanks for listening.
Hi Patrick.
Hello.
Just wondering what your advice would be to someone who doesn't enjoy the job long enough and wants to take a chance, but feel that they don't have the necessary education or the qualifications behind them to have that chance.
Yeah, well, neither did I really. I think you can fake it and you can learn as you go. You'll make a ton of mistakes, but if you don't like your job and you're passionate about something else, you've got to follow it. You've got to take the lead. You'll be kicking yourself if you don't. And once you do start having family and you start planting your feet, and mortgages and all that sort of stuff starts weighing on your back, you might want to move from that comfortable position, and crossing that threshold will be so much harder. So do it now while you're young.
That's just a quick question: is why? What brought you to Perth? Why that move? What was the thing that hooked you in here? So if you arrived and you thought, you got the doors through, what was it that made you stay?
It's a good question. I after travelling around the world and then around Australia in my van, I went back to Melbourne, and my mum was sick with cancer, and none of my brothers or sisters actually finished high school. That was broad minutes. Girls were pregnant by the time I was 16, 17. So she said to me, she said, make sure, because I'd already done a drafting course at that time, and she thought I was an architect. And there is a difference between draftspeople and architects. But my mum, in her eyes, she thought I was an architect already. And I was like, I'm not an architect, I'm a draftsman. And then, before she passed away, she said, make sure you study architecture. So I kept that promise, and at the time I was looking at other universities around Australia. And Perth at that time, when I'd been through Perth in the late 90s, was actually cheaper to live in Melbourne. So that's one of the reasons I actually came back to Perth, because I thought it was going to be less distracting. I didn't have all my mates saying, come, let's go to the pub. And Perth was actually cheaper to live here and rent out rooms. Yeah. Chance.